Hey, what's up everybody? It's Ray here. I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about back button autofocus and is it better than shutter button autofocus? I've shot shutter button autofocus from DSLR days all the way up into the mirrorless and I still shoot that. I'm sure many of you probably shoot it a little bit more with mirrorless now just because of the eye tracking and subject tracking and that sort of thing, but with DSLRs, I know many of you, back button autofocus was king. And what I want to show you is the one thing that I think is a little bit better with shutter button autofocus than back button autofocus. All right, let's take a look through the lens here. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to show you my hands on the back of the camera here, just so I can show you the difference between back button and shutter button autofocus. So for many of you with back button autofocus, I'm going to go ahead and leave the camera set as a DSLR would be. So just a single point autofocus in continuous. So those are the settings. And so with many of you for standard back button autofocus, what you would do is you would press your AF on button or whatever button you have programmed to be your sort of back button autofocus. So you'd press that, it would focus in on your subject, and then you'd let go. You could compose however you want, and you would take the shot. Nice and easy, right? But what happens if you want to change a setting while you're doing that? And for most of us, that would usually mean shutter speed or ISO. And so if your thumb is stuck on the AF on button trying to track a subject, then it's not free to change a setting back here using your back wheel. You could change it to the front wheel, but then you can't shoot at the same time as you're changing a setting. So basically you need two fingers to be able to track and focus on a subject and take the photos. With shutter button autofocus, what I've done is I focus on my subject just like you would, so half press shutter button here. And instead of letting off of the back button autofocus like you would with normal back button autofocus, you press and hold the AF on button. That locks focus. So watch as I move around here. As long as I keep my thumb held there, I can half press, fully press my shutter button, and it does not focus. Now, if I let go of my back button, so I'll let go with my thumb, and then half press, it will focus on something else. So then I have to come back, focus on my subject, hold that, hold the back button, AF on button, it locks it, and then I can recompose and take the photo however I'd like. So what this allows me to do, however, is I have my thumb free to do stuff. So right now I'm half pressed on the shutter button, as you can see, and I'm tracking my subject. So my subject, in this case, is stationary. It's not a big deal when you have a very stationary subject, but most of the time birds aren't just sitting there like they are here, right? And if we look through this, you can see I'm constantly tracking focus. So like watch, I'll switch back here and focus there. I'll come back and focus on this bird here. Let's grab him, there we go. And it is a little bit light on the exposure here. So look, I can darken my exposure, but the whole time I'm still halfway held and still focusing and tracking on my subject. So I can change my exposure while focusing and while shooting. So I can't recompose and take the shot in this circumstance, but when you have a subject that's moving actively, that's not something we're usually doing. We're usually just trying to keep our autofocus point on our subject, and then we want to be able to change our exposure while we take a shot. So right there, I'll shoot, I'll lighten it up, I'll shoot, and there you can actually see the light is changing, right? We're getting overcast light now. So the sun went under some clouds, so I can change the exposure, get that looking good, take the shot. I can darken it if I want, take the shot. I can do all those things, and the entire time I'm still focusing and tracking my subject with my shutter button halfway held. So to me, that's a big advantage over back button autofocus, because if my thumb was back here trying to track this subject right now, I wouldn't have my thumb free to change the shutter speed or ISO. Even if I remapped my front wheel to do one of those functions, I still wouldn't be able to take a picture while changing those. So that is just basically the biggest difference right there. Now, if we switch into mirrorless terms, so let me switch my autofocus into what we're using, in this case, like 3D tracking. It's a lot different now, because now I just can kind of recompose and track the entire time. But again, even with this, if my thumb has to be on the back button for focus at this point, I can't change my exposure. Even if I can recompose and do everything I want with the eye tracking, I cannot change my exposure unless I stop focusing on my subject, then change my exposure, then go back to pressing that AF on button. But if I'm just using the shutter button like I am now, watch, here we go, shutter button on, I can stay focused on my subject, track them around, and change the exposure while taking photos. So I'll shoot there, I'll darken it, compose that way, and shoot there. I get a little bit more flexibility and freedom because I have my thumb free. So there you go. That's my suggestion, is to try shutter button autofocus because it frees up that thumb to allow you to change some settings. And instead of using 2 fingers to focus and track and shoot, you get to use 1 finger to do both. And it frees up that thumb. So see what you think, give it a shot. Hopefully it helps you out and gives you a little bit better opportunities to get some good photos.